Now,
Okay, good. Now we're recording. So if we can start at the beginning. Thank you, Mr. Tabachnick, for agreeing to be interviewed. We're going to ask some questions, background questions for context. Start off with where your parents were born.
both of my parents were born in Montreal.
Okay, very good. And where were you born?
I was born in Montreal and lived here all my life.
Okay, and where did you receive your education?
Most of my elementary education was in Montreal. Family moved to Laval, Chomedy, or Saint Martin at the time. I got my secondary education there. And post-secondary, I started at Sir George, missed a lot of years, and completed it at Concordia.
Okay, and what is your occupation?
I am a consultant working with international student recruiting companies, dealing with colleges and universities in Canada. And at the same time, I have a travel agent license and I'm a travel consultant.
Okay, and where do you live now?
I live in Point Claire on the West Island of Montreal.
Okay, and now we're going to talk about questions concerning your experience living in Quebec today. And from your point of view, what is the best thing about living in Quebec today?
I'm just about everything except politics, and I'm a long time low-level politician, having been elected 6 times to the school board, 6 or 7 times to the school board, and as chairman. So I follow politics closely, but I enjoy everything about Quebec except the politics.
Okay, and this question can prove difficult. I'd like you to answer it as posed, but you're free to elaborate as you like. Describe your relationship to Quebec in a single word.
The word I would use is conflicted. And conflicted because for the most part, the people that I have worked with or I come in contact with or socialize with across the province are nice, good, decent people, understanding, welcoming, and just that's part of what makes this a good place to live. The conflict comes with the politics especially of the last while. A politics of division and separation, and that makes it makes me sad. But that's my conflict with that's why I feel conflicted living here.
Okay, and where do you feel most at home in Quebec? For example, in communities based on language, culture, profession, or geographic location?
Well, as I mentioned, I was a part of the school board network for many years, 25, almost 30 years, including not only as chairman of my own school board, but as president of the Quebec Association of English School Boards. And that gave me the opportunity to travel across the province. So I feel relatively comfortable almost anywhere across the province, regardless of language or other cultural considerations. I feel pretty comfortable and generally pretty welcome.
Okay, and how would you define a Quebecer? And do you think the official definition in Quebec includes you?
A Quebecer to me is anyone who lives here, was born here, decides to come here, wants to stay here in Quebec and participate in our society. That to me is a Quebecer. According to what this government and some previous governments define as a Quebecer, even though I'm 72 years old and have been here all my life, I will never be a true Quebecer. I am one of les autres, and I will always be, and I continue to be asked even at this stage of my life where I come from. And if I say I come from Montreal, I get, no, where's your family come from? They come from Montreal. Where does their family come? Unfortunately, according to the definition that the government believes, I will never be a true Quebecer.
Okay. That leads us into the next question. Has your sense of identity as a Quebecer changed over the years? And if so, in what ways?
Um, my sense of identity has not really changed. I grew up like many of my peers. I grew up in an English, in my case, a Jewish English enclave in the city, and then in Laval, in Chomedy, um, and then even as an adult in the West Island. But my sense of identity has always been as a Canadian, and I'm a Canadian who lives in Quebec, and so that is always part of me. I've traveled extensively internationally. I introduce myself as a Canadian from Quebec. Um, it's a strong in me. It's a strongly held identity, and that really hasn't changed. Has it changed about being a Quebecer? Maybe somewhat, but I still look at myself as a Canadian living in Quebec, so I hold on to that value.
Okay. And what do you find are some of the most difficult things about living in Quebec?
Well, we're back to the political divide, I think, because on a personal level, it's not that difficult. But on the political side, I'm sensitive to the systemic racism that we have, that we've exhibited as a society. It's troubling and it's bothering me, and I talk about it with my friends. The attitude of, I've made some notes. The attitude of people, an almost xenophobic attitude, and they're harsh words, and I know that people get upset, but certain actions of the government lead you to believe that there is a racist attitude that the government not only portrays but almost promotes, and to me that's a very sad statement to have to make.
Now, in recent years, some members of Quebec's Francophone majority have identified a number of linguistic and cultural threats. Which of these do you share and support, and which of these make you feel excluded or targeted?
I'll give you if you want a list of pieces of legislation, I can give you a whole numerology from 101 to 21 to 96 to 40. Those are the kinds of things that make me feel excluded, and I believe are purposely meant to make me feel excluded. We have, as an English community and as someone involved in education, the English community has made incredible efforts to learn French and to become part of the French community of Quebec. To preserve, one of our strengths is the fact that we are a French community, that we have, whether they like it or not, that we're a very bilingual, very flexible, very mobile community. That's important, that we continue to teach French, learn French. I'm never going to know all the pop stars in French, and I'm never going to know all the movies vedettes in French. I know that, and they can hate me for it, but I'm worried how it's become a war of culture rather than let's ensure that we protect the good of what we've got, instead of the attitude of let's get rid of what we don't like.
Okay. What in your mind is the biggest problem facing Quebec, and how do you think it could be resolved?
It's funny, this is the one question I didn't have a note against, because I don't know what the biggest problem in Quebec is. I think it's a lack of focus, a governmental lack of focus. There are big issues: healthcare, education, seniors, homelessness, transportation, the ecology, the atmosphere. There's a ton of big things that we should focus on. And instead, we focus on the things that divide us. We focus on language. We focus on color. We focus on race. We focus on the province against Montreal, Montreal against the province. To me, the biggest problem is that lack of a coherent focus that really all Quebecers, regardless of what community you're from, could and should get behind.
Okay. Now,
sounds like I'm running for office.
Now, the next question I'm going to preface by just giving a little bit of background. Have you been able to see the documentary by Guy Rogers, What We Choose to Remember?
No, I have it on my to-do list, but I haven't seen it.
What I will do for you, and I'm doing to almost everybody I do interview, because I'm a great promoter of the documentary because of what it has to say and how it says it. It's a very clear, concise portrayal of Quebec today and how we got to where we are. The subtitle of it, it's what we choose to remember Quebec through waves of immigration. I am going to send you the link to that when we're done here.
Thank you.
And that link will take you, and you can watch it yourself. If your TV is hooked up to the internet, you can watch it on your TV. If not, you can watch it on your computer, iPad, phone, whatever you like. So I'm happy to do that because it is such a great film. And the reason I bring that up is because Guy Rogers, the director and writer of the film, used a tool that I'm going to ask you to use very effectively in that documentary, which is indicate by a show of fingers. So having said all of that, I'm going to ask you by a show of fingers on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being weakest, 10 being strongest, how strongly do you feel that the joys of living in Quebec outweigh the challenges?
My fingers. I need 2 hands.
Very good. Thank you very much. Now, we're about to conclude, but before we do, I want to ask you if there's anything else you would like to say about your sense of identity and belonging in Quebec.
Not so much for me, but for future generations. I worry that my cultural groups, and I'm a member of several, are threatened by the political atmosphere of Quebec. I worry about our English education institutions. Cornerstone of the community is its education system. I'm concerned greatly. 20 years ago, I told a group at a conference where I was speaking that it probably won't happen in my lifetime, but the end of English education as we know it in Quebec is on the horizon. And it may happen in my lifetime. Aside from that, I don't really feel, I mean, education's a big thing. The other issues that I've mentioned are a big thing. I worry about the threat to the community. As an example, I have 2 kids, 5 grandchildren. None of them live in Quebec. None of them will ever live in Quebec. They're not coming back. Most of our friends are in the same condition where their children or most of their children have gone. In my case, it's my generation is here. My kids are gone. That's generation 2. Their kids don't live here. That's generation 3 gone. I've got teenage grandchildren, so in the next 10 years, there's another generation coming along. They never will be here. I worry about the long-term viability and sustainability of a minority language community in Quebec.
Okay, very good. Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Tabachnick, for your insight, your agreement to participate in our project. I'm going to turn off the recording now, and I'd just like to have a little discussion with you afterwards
Sure.
on camera.
Sure.